Next question is in the hands of Ms Edge.
Mr Speaker, I'd just like to ask all candidates, if you were successful today, what do you feel the CPD that you would require to be able to hit the ground running?
What CPD would you require to hit the ground running? And we'll start with Mrs Corlett.
Thank you. That's an interesting one. Given that the job description still remains a little vague as to what the expectations are for an MLC, it's difficult to expand on what the CPD requirements would be. I think personally, whilst I am familiar with some parts of government, I would like to have a better understanding of how it all fits together and how it operates, so some further involvement in that. And I think also from a CPD perspective, I think it would depend on whether a departmental role was to be taken and what the expectations of that role might be. I'd like to give a more full answer, but I think because the role at this point is still a little uncertain, it's difficult to be more specific at this time.
Ms Joughin.
Probably initially revising the initial information and advice and guidance that is concerned with the role of MLC to better understand it. Probably a piece of research. Recently I've actually been looking through the Isle of Man in Figures 2016, which is a very interesting document, and it provides a lot of useful information as to how we have arrived where we are actually today. I've been concentrating particularly looking at employment in the various sectors, and there's some quite dramatic information in those figures, particularly when you look at the doubling up of the population. There's been a very great change between the 1970s until sort of 2016 basically, of the levels of employment in the various sectors. So probably a piece of research that would provide me with a lot of historic useful information and background to enable me to better understand the workings of government, the island, and any practical applications.
Mr Furner.
A code of conduct, or if it doesn't exist, something that's equivalent to a code of conduct. I would like to understand the technical terminology of some legislation and the meaning of certain phrases, so that the phrases that are repeated and have a special meaning. I'd like to know more about the specific protocols and behaviours of a member of Legislative Council and the keys and the differences between them. Also the process of Parliament and government, how that works. And finally, in-depth knowledge of the blue books, the dark blue book, the light blue book, and the pink book. Those are the immediate CPDs that I would be interested in. Of course, I accept that CPD is continuous, and so it will go on continuously throughout the 5 years. But that's the beginning.
This is Lord-Brennan.
The basics of the protocols and conventions that we need to know at LegCo and in Tynwald, so that you get things right. How to properly table an amendment, because I think there's probably a lot more to that than the sound, you know, in terms of making sure things are done correctly and you're talking to the right people, because you're not just sort of doing things on the fly and making, you know, there will be a proper order to make sure things get done correctly, so that you're bringing things in the right way. I've read the third report from the Committee on the Functioning of Tynwald that addresses CPD training for members, and I think that speed reading might be on there. So yeah, I'd take advantage of that, because I know that there would be a lot of reading to do.
Thank you. Mr Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to the kind of skill set required for the job, and it's actually quite broad and difficult, I think, for a CPD to address that. I'm not saying we shouldn't have it. Clearly it's needed. But there's a starting point where a high level of assumed knowledge, I think, is required before you start. But on my list, I would have law. You need to have understanding, I think, of the law. I think the elements of political science as they pertain to the Isle of Man, both at a kind of high level and at a more technical, detailed level. Governance, again, I keep coming back to this because it's so important in terms of what LegCo, and if you don't understand how governance frameworks operate. I think it's difficult to fulfil the duty of MLC. Finance is absolutely fundamental. It's at the heart of everything we do. And I've got two other kind of slightly more interesting ones in one respect. And one's critical thinking. That's something I think I like to see taught in schools. And particularly as it pertains to decision making, behavioural science. Because behavioural science is really emerging as a discipline, particularly about how we make decisions. And we're all human, so we all have our biases, conscious and unconscious. And I think it's important, particularly for LegCo, to appreciate that, about how people arrive at decisions.
Thank you. Mrs. Humbles.
Well, I know that there'll be a lot of one-on-one training with myself, and certainly late nights as well. There's an awful lot of reading to do. But personally, I would like CPD in each department with ministers or members, if the ministers don't have time, to just catch up on absolutely everything that is currently going on, anything that, being a member of the media, I might have kind of missed. Certainly over the course of like the last month and a bit, where I've been stuck in an archive room. But I would say, yes, I'd want to catch up with members, ministers, also with leaders of statutory boards as well, committees. I'd want to know exactly what is going on in every different area of Tynwald, or as much as I can do, so that, you know, I can do the job, essentially, and get going as soon as possible.